We've been taking it on the chin so long, just trying to keep from being wiped out. I think that we've forgotten that we have a purpose. I know the rest of the world is forgotten. The point is simply this. We need to get into the world saving lives, helping with disaster relief. We need to present ourselves as a team. Today on the Comic Book Report, the Astonishing X-men Omnibus. Stick around and check it out. Greetings all, my name is Dominic and you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And right now, we're going to be taking a look at Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men run. I'm really excited to talk about this little omnibus. I think back in the day, this was maybe my first complete X-Men run I had ever read, and I haven't read this in years. So when I went ahead and picked up a copy of the reprint of this omnibus, I was eager to dive back in. So let's get to that review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Joss Whedon and penciled by John Cassaday. The issues presented in this volume were first published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2004. The volume itself collects the Astonishing X-Men issues 1 through 24 and Giant Size Astonishing X-Men number 1. And this oversized hardcover edition comes in at 672 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a brief spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the entirety of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that omnibus edition. And right from the jump, I'll say I got the direct market cover. There was also a standard edition cover. I'll try to put up a brief picture so you can compare. Personally, I like that standard edition cover better, but at the time I bought this, it was about $20 more expensive than this direct market cover. And I thought, you know what, this one's good enough. Now this edition, like the other Marvel omnibuses, is an oversized hardcover with glossy print pages. And it does contain the entirety of the Joss Whedon, John Cassaday Astonishing X-Men run. And now we'll go ahead and take off that dust jacket and take a look at, the full details of the dust jacket. And then in a moment, we'll take a look at the under the dust jacket wraparound artwork. Again, I have to say, I love that Marvel and DC and some of the other publishers are doing a lot of the hardcover books they release with under the dust jacket artwork. This is a feature I did not see often, even a decade ago. So I love that we get to see this. I love the bonus art, as I like to call it. And overall, the stuff they picked here for the Astonishing X-Men is stunning. And now that we've taken a good look at the exteriors and the artwork, dust jacket, all of that, I did want to provide you with a quick look at the binding for this edition, which is the 2021 reprint of the Astonishing X-Men Omnibus. At any rate, you can get a good look at the binding here. Looks to be sewn binding, I believe. And overall, no complaints. We do get a little bit of gutter loss, but nothing too critical, at least in my opinion. Overall, a really sturdy, well-made collection. And with that, we can go ahead and dive into the collection proper. And I really like how they mapped this guy pretty soon after the front matter and title page, things like that. We're treated to a multiple page, maybe 6 pages of catching you up on the X-Men mythos. Some of the greatest hits, biggest story arcs, especially the ones that are pertinent to the current team and what they're going to go ahead and build throughout the Astonishing X-Men run. And that actually segues perfectly into one of my favorite features about this particular run on the X-Men, and that is that this is a perfect on-ramp for new readers of X-Men. I think that one of the biggest drawbacks to being an X-Men fan or someone who wants to be an X-Men fan is that it can be really difficult to dive into the X-Men franchise as far as the comic books are concerned, because a lot of their mythos, a lot of their history is heavily based on continuity. There's always so many subplots going on and things that are so informed by the history of these characters, the multiple X teams and what have you, that it can be really daunting. I know especially once you hit the Chris Claremont era, he just kind of spiderwebbed out into so many different directions, so many plots, subplots, characters, and it can be really exhausting to find a way to break in, short of starting, at the beginning of the Claremont run. And I think modern X-Men as well can sometimes do the same thing. There could be a really high barrier of entry to a lot of the X-Men titles. I do think House and Powers of X is probably the best modern on-ramp for X-Men. That, and then this Astonishing X-Men run from the early 2000s. And even with that being said, I'm still so elated that they decided to put those 6 pages brushing you up on some of the most pertinent details of the X-Men's long history to catch up new readers on what they'll need to know to dive into this collection proper. As far as how this book is set up, the cast of the main team is fantastic. It's a great mix of some of the original players, along with some of Claremont's best, along with just some other great team additions. The primary lineup, I believe, is Cyclops, Wolverine, Kitty Pryde, the Beast, Emma Frost, and Colossus. For all intents and purposes, Xavier's kind of gone or taking a sabbatical, Jean Grey is gone, and these are the remnants of some of the core X-Men, and they come together to restart kind of the school, as well as be a real superhero team again. And predictably, it doesn't take long for things to get very complicated. I should note as well that Colossus actually joins the team later when he's found after being presumed dead for a very long time. That in itself is a very fun story arc, and to see the reunion between his character and Kitty Pryde made my Chris Claremont longtime fan heart very happy to see. As far as the more prominent story arcs throughout this volume, the beginning arc is largely about the mutant cure, which is a plotline you see sort of adapted in the X-Men 3 film. You also have a great story arc that is sort of what if the Danger Room, the room by which the X-Men would always train in a lot of these combat scenarios, this high-functioning AI simulator room, what if all along that was actually a sentient, artificially intelligent being, and what if Xavier maybe knew this and exploited it for decades? What happens to that creature, and what happens if the Danger Room itself becomes a villain to the X-Men? Such a great and imaginative plot. I really loved that whole story arc. We have the return of Colossus, of course, and then we have this alien story arc where this alien comes from the break world with a prophecy trying to kill all the mutants and X-Men because they believe Colossus is going to bring destruction to their entire planet. That's something that's kind of throughout most of this run, and it culminates with that finally. Some great stories in here. We have the return of the Hellfire Club and some additions of some very fun mutants at the school. And for me, this really just functions on all cylinders, and it really underscores some of the things I believe make an incredible X-Men book, which are some super heroics, a great core team, the elements of the school and raising up a younger generation of mutants, kind of all in the blender with just some great science fiction action adventure. As far as the writing goes, like I said, I think that they really understand what makes a great X-Men book, and Joss Whedon, you might know him from things like The Avengers and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He's an incredible writer, and I think he shines best with characters, and of course you need great characterization if you're going to be writing an X-Men team book, and I think it's here. I do think if there's any shortcoming in the writing, I just don't think Wolverine was maybe utilized to his full potential. He's gruff, he's fun, there's still a lot of great Wolverine moments, but he's kind of underserved in this run as a whole, in my opinion. He's there, but they don't really give him as much to do. As much as I loved seeing him and Colossus's fastball special come back, the spotlight is really more on Colossus, Kitty Pryde, and I would say even Emma Frost and Cyclops of that core X-Men lineup. That's where a lot of the character development and conflict, I would say, really centers around those 4 X-Men, even more than Wolverine, Beast, and some of the other even more auxiliary X-Men characters. As far as the art goes, I could go on and on about what a legend John Cassaday is, and I will. Frankly, his art is hard to top. I really liked what he did on Planetary. I reviewed that omnibus last year, and I've just always been impressed by this man's work, his pencils. There's a kind of realism to the character models, and just overall, it's just sweeping and breathtaking, and the Astonishing X-Men is really no different. This is some of Cassaday's greatest Omnibus work that I've had the pleasure to read, and I'm always looking for more of his stuff because I just think he hits it out of the park at all times. To see the X-Men back in costume doing their super heroic thing, I think it's just brought to life so much by what Cassaday does on the book. At this point in the video, I really just want to go ahead and highlight some of my favorite moments from this collection. I think, again, the return of Colossus was wonderful. Even more than the return of the character himself, just seeing how he deals with the trauma of the legacy virus and all that's transpired while he's been away, along with just his reunion and the rekindling of the romance between him and Kitty Pryde, I just thought was fantastic. There was so much there that was rich and just built in a lot of history for those characters, and I think that you get to see a lot of that just come to fruition in this collection. I also just really love the story arc with the sentient danger room. I think for me, when I first read that almost a decade ago now, it was just so striking, and it still really packs a punch today. I think that that was a great story arc too, of just unraveling kind of the moral questionability of Charles Xavier. I think that having Charles be more of a flawed character is definitely something I love explored. We see it in storylines like this, and I know the whole Dawn of X era, that definitely comes to mind as well, kind of the ethics of what they're doing there with Krakoa, and I just think it makes such a more complex character. I will say Xavier shows up kind of in the middle, toward the back half a little bit. He's not overly utilized, which I think is fun. It really puts the kind of the leadership really more squarely on Cyclops, which is good to see. But just what we do get of Xavier in this collection is just pretty wild, and I thought that he was used very well. I also loved the dynamic between Scott Summers and Emma Frost. This is a phase where a lot of people are still very mistrustful of Emma Frost, and I think that her dynamic with Scott, and especially Kitty Pryde, are just so much fun to see them unpack it, see what happens as you have the return of the Hellfire Club as well, which of course she has a long legacy with. Just some really complex storytelling, and I think longtime X-Men fans will really enjoy what they read in Astonishing X-Men, and I think it's a fine place for new readers to experience these characters for the first time. Some of the only negatives I would include about this collection for me, I mentioned it earlier, but how they utilized Wolverine I think was a bit underserved. Now, I totally agree that Wolverine doesn't have to be the complete spotlight character for everything that has an X-Men stamp on it. I totally respect that, I totally agree. But I think that since this really served Emma Frost, Cyclops, Colossus, and Kitty Pryde, and to a lesser extent the Beast, I don't think that there was really anything that spotlighted Wolverine's character throughout pretty much this whole run, and I would have loved to see it. I do think, too, because Joss Whedon did some really refreshing things with a lot of these characters, my bar was pretty high initially to see what he would do when tackling Wolverine. Would we get a small story arc that really delved into his character, his psyche, his past, some of the conflicts that make his character so gripping and engaging? And I found that in general, he almost felt like a stock character that would have kind of gruff, fun one-liners, and just kind of be that part of the team dynamic. And like I said, it works. It's still Wolverine. I don't necessarily think it's disingenuous, just underutilized. The other kind of, I guess, complaint I have was I also just wish this run was longer. And maybe that's a contrary opinion. Maybe some people think that, 25 issues is just perfect. But I could have easily read 50 issues from this run. We were served with so many just innovative story arcs, and I was just curious what else they would have if they continued the title under this creative team. I am curious in the comments below. Let me know, have you read The Astonishing X-Men from Joss Whedon and John Cassaday? What do you think about it? What are some of your highlights from it? What are some things you wish were maybe a little better or changed? And have you read any of the other X-Men runs? How would you put this in comparison? Lately, I've just really been wanting to hear more from all of you watchers out there. So if you're still watching, let me know what you think in the comments below. I always appreciate it. Back to the book itself, I will say again, I highly recommend this for any prospective X-Men fans out there who want to find a fun place to jump on. I think that this is an excellent on-ramp. You have those 6 pages at the beginning that provide better context for it, and it's only about 25 issues, and I think where that's a pro, is for people that want to read a more or less self-contained story from the same creative teams and can feel like they could bookend this whole book and think, wow, that was a great chunk of X-Men. They can jump off the title if they feel so inclined, or they can go double down and find more books with some of their favorite characters in here. I think in that way, this is a great sampling of X-Men. I think if you're trying to get someone to read X-Men, this is certainly one I'd recommend on my short list for people that are just checking it out. It's one of my favorite just modern runs for the title, and I think that you could do so much worse than the Astonishing X-Men. And while many X-Men runs have this characteristic, this is also one of my favorite X-Men runs that deals with science fiction tropes. We have interstellar travel, we have future technology, we have just so many fun little things that scream sci-fi to me, that if you're looking for kind of an X-Men sci-fi epic, I think that this is, again, a great contender. I also love seeing the characters back in more or less classic costumes. I mean, you even have Wolverine back in the yellow and blue, which who doesn't love to see that? And as we approach the last issue in this collection here, I have to say that the whole run goes out on a very climactic, epic battle, epic scene, and it's really just something to behold. And I think that this is where Joss Whedon and John Cassaday are just a masterclass in their storytelling. Everything from the whole run kind of comes to a satisfying conclusion, if not a tragic conclusion, with everything that happens to Kitty Pryde, which even though you might be able to see in these issues, I'll let you go ahead and read and delve into what that is for yourself. But it really is a nice bow on top. You can leave this collection feeling deeply satisfied from a story well told. And what's great too is after all these issues, we're treated to a nice handful of bonus features at the back of the omnibus. Everything from variant covers to art, sketches, and some essays. A fantastic load of extras at the back of this omnibus. Not the biggest collection around, but it's a dense book as far as the quality. I'm not sure if this one is still in print, but I know they've reprinted this, so who knows, they could do it again. If you're looking for Astonishing X-Men, try to find it. They also have trades, they have digital, the floppy single issues, of course. And now time for a grade. This should be no surprise between its excellent plotting, character work, and outstanding elevated art throughout that the Comic Book Report gives The Astonishing X-Men by Joss Whedon and John Cassaday an A-. This is a tour de force omnibus that I absolutely would recommend to any X-Men or prospective X-Men fan out there. A low barrier to entry and a memorable sequence of story arcs. I have read and now reread this whole run and been deeply satisfied. And frankly, I'll likely read it again as time allows. What are you waiting for? Go ahead and check out the Astonishing X-Men Omnibus. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Thank you so much for stopping by. Don't forget to give this video a like, a comment, and check out some of my other videos. Have a good one.